Velkommen til Lang Levetid. Inden vi går i gang, hvis du synes, det her er værd at lytte til, så abonner meget gerne på podcasten lige der, hvor du lytter med lige nu. Det er gratis, og hvis du liker, anmelder eller deler afsnittet, så hjælper du os med at få de her vigtige samtaler ud til endnu flere mennesker. Husk, at vi har samlet alle vores samarbejdspartnere, de bedste rabatkoder og de produkter, jeg jo selv bruger og kan stå 100% indenfor på langlevetid.dk. Og hvis du har lyst til at opleve Lang Levetid live, så har vi udviklet et format, hvor du ikke bare sidder og kigger på. Du bliver en del af oplevelsen, næsten som om du er med i podcasten, og du får endda til sidst din helt egen longevity score. Næste show er i Bremen Teater i København den 4. november. Billetter og det praktiske, det finder du inde på langlevetid.dk. Nu til dagens episode.
Do you know, Torkil, that I had a huge shitstorm just by saying not even 1/10 of what you say in your new book?
Yeah,
I mean, not even close.
Yeah.
And Denmark went insane. I've been called from a respected journalist newspaper that I was life-threatening to society of the things I said, because people were worried they would go into the sun and they'd get cancer and then die. So reading your book, Solkuren, The Sun Cure, made me a very happy person, because you, as a doctor and a person with a brain that's functioning highly, have done the work that I cannot myself do. That is actually gather all the data that's out there and then on a most beautiful Socratic way lead people to the conclusion that I hopefully we can talk about today, that the dangers of the sun definitely have a little bit maybe over what they actually are.
Yeah.
That of course still there are some dangers to it, but what they are, how it works, we can talk about that today. But did you know that before you said yes to the podcast, did you realize this?
Yeah, because I saw the shitstorm and I messaged you. Yes. You didn't see the message until later.
No.
I messaged it
I got a lot of
at the
messages
time.
those days.
I need to come to the rescue here. So, because everything you said was right, and even as you say, even more right. You could have said so much more. And it's crazy. It's crazy that we got to this point that we started fearing the sun, even though when you go through all the research, it's super healthy. All the rays from the sun, are used by our body. We are developed. Life has been around for 4 billion years. We are the kind of the end result of that, and our body or all our physiological systems has been developed and fine-tuned in cooperation with the light, from the basic functions of the cells and the mitochondria all the way up to the hormones, through our circadian rhythm, everything. And there's so much that when I started writing the Solkuren, the sun cure, I thought it was possible to do it almost, but it was so hard. I've never written or done so much work, in 2 years, because even I did not know before I started getting the interest in sunlight. I didn't even know that more than half of the sunlight is infrared, that we cannot see it, and that it goes into our bodies and do the work.
3-6 centimeters.
More. It goes straight through. Or a certain percentage goes straight through. Most of it is used inside, and just a little bit can leave throughout on the other side. So, and how we got to this point that we were more scared of the downsides than the upsides, it's just impossible for me when I see the whole research in combination, in total, how we got there, because it's so logical.
But let's rewind a little bit. When do you decide, because you're not a particular, you haven't been like a sun fetishist, or you haven't talked about this app. I mean, this is not an area of your...
The pulse cure that we talked about in the last, I didn't mention the sun at all.
No.
There is no trace of it.
So it's not an area for you. It's how does this come out of nothing? Or
It came actually out of nothing. I was working in the north of Norway. I was being a substitute doctor for a couple of general practitioners. And when they came back, I just had a brief conversation with them, and they told me they had been to a conference where they had heard Fredrik Paulun, a Swedish nutritionist, who was presenting his book Lysrevolutionen, The Light Revolution in Swedish. And I bought it right away, looked through it, understood that, wow, all this information, I had no clue. And I immediately understood because on my Garmin watch and on the Oura ring, I could see the effect of sunlight. So I had seen for the previous years that if I was in the sun, the heart rate variability could double. And in so many people that had messaged me on Instagram and on Facebook had told the same thing. So I understood that there is something here. And then when I read the Light Revolution of his book,
which is, what is it? Is it the same area? Is it also about the sun?
It's more about red light therapy.
Okay,
it's
fine.
about the sun.
Sure,
but it's mainly focused on red light therapy,
which is a big part of the sun.
Which is a
red
big
and
part
infrared,
of it, yeah.
Whatever. People actually don't realize that.
Yeah.
But
and then I suggested to my Norwegian publisher, Cappelen, which is Norway's biggest publisher, I said, you need to translate this. This is super important, and this is the next big thing about sunlight and what it does for us. And they said, they said, no, they were interested. They had checked it out, but they thought there's too much about red light therapy. And they wanted a book on the sun. And then I said, well,
fuck it.
Well, why don't I write it? And they, yeah, cool. They were all cheering.
Everyone loves a good shitstorm, right?
And suddenly, suddenly, then I found myself having a task that I thought was possible to would not be too much work. You know, how much could it be?
Yeah.
You know, it was vitamin D, it was a couple of hormones, and that should take me like a couple of months.
Sure.
And it has taken me 2 years. With intensive study, and from knowing nothing about it. Of course, I, like most people, knew it was vitamin D, but more than that, of all the facts in the book, and you have read it, it's quite a lot.
There's so, I mean, it's so comprehensive, and hopefully this will be a work that you've done that we will reference to in the future, and I hope it comes out in other languages as well. But I hope this is what we will reference, because you are actually not doing a lot of conclusions. You're just presenting all the data. I mean, whenever you reluctantly write something that's kind of a conclusion, you actually say that you usually quote someone else doing a conclusion in their study, which I think you had the ability to do something that I definitely couldn't, is being calm enough to write something where people have to draw their own conclusions, but you're leading them like perfectly to the end conclusion, which is, guys,
get more sunlight. Get out.
Get out there.
Get out there.
And one thing, my girlfriend is a psychiatrist. Is she a psychologist? Sorry, different. Very important distinction. Psychologist. And when I talked about this, there's a ratio in the book that I think it's super important to know. And this is not your conclusion. This is other people's conclusion as well. That for every one life that we save from skin cancers like melanoma, whatever, we don't save 75 other lives. I mean, we lose 75 other 75 lives. People to heart disease, to diabetes, cancers, other stuff. Very, very well presented in the book why that is true. So, and there is this test or this philosophical where you as a person, you get to choose in a railroad that 75 people will be killed here. As in this test, it's 5 people, but 5 people will be driven over by a train unless you move a handle to change the lane of that train, but then it kills 1 person. But you have to actively, that lever, you have to change killing that 1 person instead of what's already going to happen, killing 5 people. And I think this is the problem. Nobody wants to move that lever because 75 people, is dying for us to save one. But no one wants to be that person or the government or whatever who moves that lever onto the other side. So, okay, we're going to kill this one instead of sacrificing 75.
But I think they will when they see the numbers now, because what has been the trouble is that we haven't looked at the benefits of sunlight. Or we have. The research is massive. How it didn't get through to people, I don't know, or I have some clues about it. But I think that once the researchers and people, and this is a huge study that you're talking about here. It's a UK biobank study.
400,000
by dermatologists. It's 400,000 people tracked for like 12, 13 years. And they can see that if you put everything, so this is kind of a thought project. Okay, if you put everybody in the UK down to the lowest UV light and sun exposure, what happens? And this based on these 400,000 people. Okay, then you can save one life from melanoma. It will cost 75 lives from other causes, just like you said. So, and on the other hand, if you put all the people in the UK or into the group with the most sun exposure, that would save 135 lives at the cost of one melanoma death. So that's
the ratio is actually
it's even a bigger ratio, mostly because it doesn't seem like the sun has so much to do with melanoma death like we thought. Okay, so that's the biggest difference. So
yeah, because actually what you also write in the book is that if you get, and you do get a higher, not a lot, but it's a little bit higher amount of people getting melanomas who have a high UV exposure. But then their deaths from melanoma goes down to 2/3. So ultimately, you will die less of melanoma being in the sun a lot. Yeah. It's the conclusion, right?
That is the conclusion from the Swedish MISS study,
which is
MISS, the melanoma in Sweden, melanoma in southern Sweden study, and Pelle Lindqvist, who has been kind of the boss from that study, he has also written, and you haven't read that, but he has written the preface for the Sun Cure.
Okay,
and he found, as you say, that the ones who got the most sun died like 3 times less, than the ones who got melanoma and had little sun exposure. But so it kind of turns up everything upside down.
We're talking about this melanoma as like it's such a small. There's a very, very low incident.
It's 300 in Norway. I'm not sure in Denmark, but it's probably somewhere in the same. Like 300 people die every year.
How many people die from heart disease in Norway?
10,000 from heart disease, 10,000 from cancers of other causes. And the UK biobank study shows that if you are in the group that gets the most sun, then you get 25% or so less heart disease, which is heart deaths, a huge difference, and like 13-14% less death of cancer of all causes. And the interesting thing is that it's the sunbeds that they use as a biomarker for getting sunlight.
What?
Yeah. So the ones who use sunbeds, they will get these numbers. And so the newest Swedish study, even more interesting. The newest study from Pelle Lindqvist.
We're killing ourselves here.
We'll fry here.
I'll ask. Please continue.
Yeah. So the solarium study from Pelle Lindqvist just released this 20th or peer-reviewed this 20th of May.
Okay, so this is brand new. What is the study?
It shows that if you use sunbeds, you will live 10 months longer than the ones who don't use sunbeds. Okay, you can try to find a prescription drug that does that, and you'd be really hard pushed to find that. And the study is like this, okay? You have one group who just will not use solarium.
Okay.
They will have normal sun exposure.
Yeah.
80% will seek sun, in Sweden in the summer. So they have a kind of, except that they don't use the sunbeds, they have a normal exposure to sunlight. And then you have one group who uses sunbeds and have no kind of risk-filled sun behavior. Okay, so they will seek the sun in Sweden, and they will not get sunburned. They will not go to in the winter go to Spain or something,
yeah, sure.
right? And the interesting thing is that for melanoma diagnosis, if you have the risk behavior, you get sunburned, you go to the Canary Islands in the winter, you will have a 60% increase of melanoma diagnosis.
Okay, diagnose. You 60% more cause of diagnosis of melanoma. Yes, 60%. Yes.
But when they check death rates, they're the same. So whether you take the sunbeds with or without these risk behaviors, they have the same mortality from melanoma. It's only in the diagnosis, and you have had an episode with Ole Brodersen about this overdiagnosis problem.
John Brodersen.
John Brodersen,
yeah, exactly.
So there's an important difference there. So much of the kind of explosion of melanoma is a problem of overdiagnosis, just like you talked about in the podcast.
I would definitely recommend listening to that episode if you haven't already, because this is super interesting, also in the same field. Okay.
So this kind of turns everything upside down. And the problem is that we as doctors have been looking.
Vi har fået en ny partner her på podcasten, og det er en svensker. De hedder Dens og laver produkter baseret på græsfodret kvæg, som I jo ved, jeg er helt besat af. De laver både protein, bone broth og piller med frysetørret lever og nyrer, endda testikler. De bygger videre på traditionelle fødevarer, men tilpasset vores moderne hverdag. Minimal forarbejdning, ingen syntetiske fyldstoffer, bare næringstæt indhold, der gør en reel forskel. Jeg har udvalgt mine yndlingsprodukter i et par bundles, men derudover kan du også som lytter af podcasten få 15% rabat på alle produkter ved at gå ind på densnutrition.com/Emil eller bruge rabatkoden Emil. Du kan også finde alle rabatkoderne til alle vores sponsorer inde på langlevetid.dk. Der er også mulighed for at signe op for vores nyhedsbrev eller købe billetter til det nye live show, der kommer her i november. Og det er altså langlevetid.dk. Intet slår vores sol udenfor. Men jeg er altså kæmpe fan af at supplere med rødt og nær infrarødt lys, som du har hørt mig tale om mange gange her i podcasten. Jeg har brugt et rødlyspanel i mange år fra lysterapi.dk, og nu er jeg også begyndt at bruge en rødlyspose, som jeg lægger i med så lidt tøj på som muligt. Her får jeg rødlysterapi på hele kroppen på én gang. Og ja, det er basically som en sovepose med rødlys. Det er en ret nem måde at slappe af på. Jeg ligger bare og lytter til en lydbog eller et eller andet imens. Rødlysposen kan faktisk også deles i 2, så den fungerer som 2 rødlysmåtter. Eller man kan nøjes med at købe bare 1 rødlysmåtte. Begge dele bruger rødt og nær infrarødt lys i de bølgelængder, man ofte ser i studier. Det er typisk omkring 650 og 850 nanometer. Det menes at kunne understøtte kroppens naturlige processer og bruges ofte i sammenhæng med restitution, hud og generelt velvære. Jeg bruger selv måtten lidt mere fleksibel, men posen er også nice, hvis jeg bare gerne vil have hele kroppen på én gang. Hvis du er nysgerrig, så kan du finde både rødlys pose og rødlys måtte på lysterapi.dk, og fordi du lytter med her, så får du altså 15% på din første ordre, hvis du går ind på lysterapi.dk/Emil.
At skin changes only. And we haven't, as a group, been looking at, okay, what's the benefits of sunlight? Because they're huge. It's across all diseases. It's about depression. It's about autoimmune diseases.
Let's go through what the benefits of the sun is, because we have talked way too much about melanoma and skin cancer stuff. And John Brodersen also came actually to the conclusion that melanoma and sun had nothing to do with each other. He said that in the podcast, and they don't even correlate. It's definitely not causal. And so there's no need to talk about that anymore. I think it's more important is to talk about what is the advantages of the sun, so people can draw their own conclusions and figure out if they want to be in the sun or not.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And then I think we should definitely also remember to talk about solariums or sunbeds as to how close to the sun is that? Because you write in the book, which I thought was quite interesting, that the body doesn't know the difference between a wavelength from a sun or a bulb or a solarium or a flame, or if it's sun or if it's light in a certain aspect of wavelength.
Yeah.
That's how the body perceives it. Period. It doesn't.
The photons are the same.
It's like glucose is glucose. It doesn't matter if from a date or from what. It's still just
It's like that. Yeah. So what the sun sends out towards us is photons, small packets that goes in 300,000 kilometers a second and just bangs into your molecules, right, from full speed and stop. And it's electromagnetic energy that goes into your cells and do something. And whether the UV rays come from the sun or from the sunbed or even from your own cells, we are making light inside of our cells. Even UV light we are making, actually, incredibly enough. So no matter where it comes from, it will have the same function in the body.
So the difference is only if the full spectrum is available at the same time.
Yeah.
But that's also one of the problems that you also present in the book, that when we look at why we think UV light is so dangerous is because we looked at UV light on its own in a petri dish or in animal studies or where we've singled it out, and we don't have the broad spectrum. And that's also why I'm asking about the sunbeds, because it obviously doesn't have the broad spectrum.
It has, at least now in Norway, 80% have red light in the sunbeds, because we now know that it will dampen inflammation, so that at least it will have the red light in combination with UV light.
So weird for me to stop, because I have the red light panel at home. I have the big ass professional one hanging in the summer. I mean, and that we see as a health product. But right next to, if I set a solarium, a sunbed, which is, in many ways the same thing. It's some kind of bulb that gives a wavelength. I mean, technically those are very close to each other. One is just classified as a health thing for me, and the other one is like a cancer risk.
Yeah.
So it's all about this perception that this is just more like it's very fragmented. Like it's not like that.
Yeah, but so there's a difference between the wavelengths. So the short wavelength ultraviolet light has a lot of energy. It's the most energetic rays that come from the sun. So they have the potential to change the DNA and make mutations. But it has done that for 4 billion years. So our physiology has made defenses against that in the normal circadian rhythm with the right amount of sunlight in the day and the right amount of darkness in the night, it will be defended. So, but what they did probably in the 40s, 50s, they used ultraviolet light on mice that was, genetically made to not have hair. And they are nocturnal animals, and they got so much of this UV light that they developed skin cancer, isolated UV light. Okay, but once they used the same experiments with less UV light or less time, they didn't get skin cancer. But it made the notion that, UV light causes skin cancer. And then in the 70s and 80s, it was a scare of ozone layer. And one of the arguments was that, if we don't do something about this, the skin cancer will quadruple, get 4 times as much. And that kind of settled in the population that the sun causes skin cancer, it will just get worse. We need to use sunscreen to avoid this and to stay out of the sun. So I think that just got the better of us, and we didn't really, what we are not looking for, we don't find.
So the problem is not us talking about UV and skin cancer, because it's not a relevant conversation when we talk about all the benefits. Because you also list in the book, you're smart, you kind of start listing all the bad things the sun does, all the diseases that we know that this will make worse. Like
it's only 3 or 4.
Yeah. So. And then there's like 60.
Almost 100. And that is not. I didn't stop at some point. It's probably a lot more.
So it's like gråstær. I don't even know what that's called.
In cataract, at least in English. Cataract.
The eyes that may be a little bit influenced by UV over time. And then some certain types of skin cancer that correlate with UV exposure. Yes, that's it. And then, but I think we should definitely talk more about what are the benefits. Like what all the research you've done, because you've spent years looking into what are the benefits of the sun? Because this is what we're missing when we're not in the sun. Because the argument is too, when we're talking about in the press, like, oh, it's UV and cancer and I get cancer. But this is not where the conversation is supposed to be. The conversation is about what are we missing out on?
Yeah.
And then people can do their own calculation if they want to. Do they want to miss out on all this? Or do they want to maybe have some percent less chance of or risk of getting some kind of skin cancer, right? This is what we're
and
doing.
they can choose themselves. So I want to show what the research shows, and then you decide yourself. I don't care what you do. I don't know you. I mean, you find your own way. My job as a doctor is to enlighten you and show you what the facts are. The objective facts from these studies.
What are the facts?
The facts are, okay, we need to see what light is. Okay, so from the sun, that would be around 5% UV light, the UVB and the UVA. 95% of the UV light is UVA. And then you would have around 40% of visible light that hits our eyes and makes it possible to see that this plant is green and coffee is brown and so on. And then you would have more than 50% is infrared light that we don't see. It doesn't have enough energy to trigger the receptors in our eye.
Okay.
But it's still a lot of energy.
And that's where you feel the heat on your body, for instance, right?
That you can feel the heat. And it will go into our body. So where the UV will stop very at the skin deep level, the infrared light will penetrate far into the body. Earlier, we used to think maybe 8 centimeters. Now we know that it can go all through the body.
So it
will probably reach 75% of adults' cells, and it will probably reach 100% of a child's cells.
Like if you go into the sun, a child will have 100% of the billions of cells would be hit by UV from the sun.
From infrared.
From the sun.
Yeah, that's right.
Duly noted.
It will go into the brain even, and it will affect how the energy works in the brain. And then, okay, we need to know what do these different wavelengths do, right? So the UVB will hit the skin. It will make vitamin D. And from cholesterol. It will take some kind of cholesterol, make it into vitamin D, and it will be activated in the liver and kidneys. And we have this system, and the more we have gone from the equator, because we as a species, until 50,000 years ago, we lived under the equator.
Yeah.
And for the kind of, I think it's 7 million years before that, when we got up on 2 legs and so on. So that's where we come from. And the farther we have moved, the paler we have gotten until we become as pale as us. And because we needed to catch the light, and particularly the UV,
being
UV
pale
light.
is just actually means that you can absorb more D vitamin from less sun, or less UVB.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also the other parts that comes from the UV. So that is the vitamin D. And then we also will get, it will trigger a POMC, it's a peptide, a prohormone, that will be split into different parts. One of them, it will make endorphins, which is kind of the body's opioid.
Which is why it feels nice to be in the sun.
Feels nice, less pain, which is probably why people go to the Canary Islands and lose their joint aches and muscle aches and so on. And we'll also make it feel better, right? So we instinctively feel better in the sun.
Okay.
And that is probably part of the reason. And also it will release endocannabinoids, which is, the runner's high, also from the UVB. And it will also regulate the immune system and the T regulatory cells. So we will have a better regulation of the immune system, which is probably involved in why we don't get as much autoimmune diseases when we get more sunlight. So that is the UVB. And then probably as important is the UVA. So the UVA, it will reach us all year round.
Also through windows and stuff, right?
It will go through. But you have to back up a little bit because UVB is only present in Denmark and Norway from probably April until late September in some good amount, right? Other than that, the whole winter we don't get the UVB, but we will get UVA even in that season.
Okay.
Even if it's less than in the summer. Okay, what the UVA does is that it will release nitric oxide, which is stored in the skin. And this is not that old research. This is probably, 10, 15 years old knowledge. That we have this store in the skin in the form of nitrate. When the sun UVA hits the skin, it will release the nitric oxide, which will lower the blood pressure about 5-6 millimeters of mercury, which is comparable to what the medicine can do.
Yeah, that's like a
medication. Yes. And it will lower the blood pressure, which is why people have lower blood pressure in the summer, and it's also probably the reason why heart disease and heart attacks and deaths from heart diseases is somewhere around 25% higher in the winter than in the summer.
That was one of the craziest thing I read in your book, is that for over the last 100 years, you've been tracking this in Norway, and it hasn't changed in 100 years. And I mean, you've gone from a poor country to a very high tech with advanced health. And those numbers have basically been the same, that the wintertime will see 20-30% higher amounts of deaths from heart disease.
Yeah, or in general.
Or
also.
in general also. Than in the summertime.
Yeah.
And there's just no way that amount can be attributed just to, let's say, temperature. Or I mean, it would be... Yeah, it doesn't make any sense that it transcends different financial situations that you as a country
be,
have.
Of course, at the opposite side in Australia or on the southern part of the world, right?
Interesting.
So that's the UVA, and then we have the visible light, and probably the most important thing about the visible light is it will affect the circadian rhythm, and 1/3 of our genes are regulated by the circadian rhythm. There are some processes in our body that needs to be optimized for the daytime when it comes to activity, to performance, to do something, to fight, to find food and whatever. And then there are some other genes that needs to be turned on at nighttime so that we can perform the recovery and the restitution that we need during the night. And what regulates that is the light that goes into the eyes that hits some other receptors than the one we can see with. It will affect the melanopsin receptors that will regulate the daytime and the nighttime, whether we have cortisol in the day or whether you have melatonin at night that we need for the nighttime.
And that's the visible light.
That's the visible light. Okay. Super important also.
For the circadian rhythm.
For the circadian rhythm. And probably other things as well, but that's the most important thing. We could talk for 10 hours, but that's the most important thing, I think. And then we have the infrared, which is more than half of the sunlight, that will penetrate deep into our body. And what it does there, it goes into the mitochondria and increases the effectiveness of the energy production. So it will affect everything. It will affect how the heart works, how the brain works, how the eye works, how the kidneys work, how everything works.
So the infrared light activates or makes the mitochondria, because it has energy that the photons gives it?
It has photons. It will go into the electron transport chain. Have you been talking about the electron transport chain on your podcast?
No.
Okay. So the mitochondria are super important.
We've talked about the mitochondria, and I think it's probably the root for every bad thing that's happening to us. One of the roots.
It's the energy problem. If we sat in here in the podcast studio and suddenly, the electrical system was poor, the lights would be flickering, sometimes it would record with a good quality, sometimes with the worse quality. The video image would be going in and out of, focus and so on. It's like that in the body. What provides energy in the body are the mitochondria. They use food. The end product of food is electrons that will go into the electron transport chain on the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And there it will produce ATP, which is the energy currency of the body that is used in all the processes. It's the ATP. The production of ATP will be smoother with this infrared light. So that is what the important thing about the infrared light. It goes into there. It will make the energy production more efficient, so that all the cells work better.
So we originally thought mitochondria only needed food to sustain, but now, as I was just talking about, it also needs the UV light. It's also another source of energy.
Yeah.
It's like adding something to. We can live off of just the food, but if you want to live fully, then you have to combine it with the UV light. Is that understood correctly?
It's compared to like lubrication of the energy process.
Okay.
It will make the cytochrome C oxidase, one of the proteins, work better because it receives the energy from the sun.
How do people find this out? I mean, do you?
It's 100 years old. Much of this research is really, really old.
Really?
Yeah. So, and the energy of a photon is quite specific. And it's interesting. I recently learned, it's not even in the book, that if you look at one molecule in the body and you would compare the energy that comes from a photon compared to heat, for example, the energy from the UV light to make the same energy change in this molecule, you would need 50,000 degrees of heat to compare it to the photon energy, because it goes into the molecule and it pushes an electron out to a little bit further out, in the electron around the photon.
It changes the cell.
It's excitation, it's what it's called. And the energy that is in that process is comparable then to 50,000 degrees you would need of
to
heat.
do that if we had to do it in a laboratory.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay.
So
there's a lot
the
of
energy is specific. It is going straight to where it's used.
So this
in
is
our
the
molecules.
infrared light that comes from the sun as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
It comes from the sun, and interestingly enough, it also comes from. It will also be reflected by greenery. I'm not sure if this is plastic.
This is plastic?
This is plastic.
I just found that out also reading your book, that, like, for instance, if you run in the forest, you think you're in the shade, but you're actually not in the shade. You're only in the shade for UV, but you're not in the shade because actually it allows infrared to go, because
it will
plants
be
doesn't, I know we
reflected.
keep pointing at this plastic, but actual plants don't use infrared.
Yeah.
So it goes straight through or reflects. So you actually get the full UV, or you get the full infrared on your body, even though you feel like you're running or you're being in the shade.
Yeah.
Which is why it feels so fucking good to be in the
That's
forest.
probably part of why it's good to be in the forest. So both from the grass and from the leaves, it will reflect the infrared.
This is insane to think
that
about.
will hit you, from the bottom up.
Yes.
It will surround you in the forest.
You don't have to take your clothes off. You don't, because it'll go through everything.
It goes through clothes. Of course, it'll be less when it goes through clothes.
Yeah, but if you spend enough time,
it will go through clothes. That's super
crazy. I think
it actually is, and I actually tried that. I was in a wedding last August. We were in Barcelona, and I just had read about these things, and then I saw that there was a normal grass, but it was also some plastic grass just by the side from exactly the same color. And then I tested. I walked to the real grass and could feel it was quite cool, even if it was like 35 degrees outside. Okay, the grass was still cool,
even though it was in the sun.
It will reflect, the infrared light. And then I stepped onto the plastic grass.
Yeah, that's
of the
horrible.
same color. It was super hot. So you can even feel it like that, and even in a very, very hot day that we don't have too much of in Denmark and Norway, unfortunately. If it's really hot, you can touch a leaf and you will feel it's cooler.
Because it doesn't absorb the UV, it reflects
it would destroy the processes. If the plants would absorb the infrared lights just as we do, it would destroy the processes inside. So it doesn't need it. It just takes it away. So, we are made to cooperate with plants. So the plants, they will take the CO2 and they will make oxygen. that we breathe, and we make CO2 that the plants take back. So we are made.
Nature is perfect. It's just us fucking with it. We can all conclude that. But now we are living in this industrial life, and we have to kind of make do with it. So so this is all the wavelengths that we went through now, or are we missing any?
No, that would be the wavelengths and the most important things from the sun. There would be more things as well, and
of course there's also blue lights and everything, but they're so invisible.
And how we misunderstood this when I think also what we have understood as doctors and as health practitioners is that we have been mostly focused on the biochemistry, and we have overlooked our bioelectric selves. And that is where the sun comes in and does its jobs very much through this kind of electrical effect. Then the sun rays are electromagnetic rays. And of course, everything that we use as energy here in this room, the energy either comes from sunlight, it comes from fossil fuels, it comes from hydroelectric power, it comes from wind power. And all of these different sources of energy originates from sunlight. Everything, right?
True.
And somehow we thought in our arrogance that we as humans, we don't need the sun. We can move inside. We now live inside, at least Americans live inside 93% of the time. I'm not sure if we live outside much more than that. And we have not been looking out if there's any side effects to that. We have thought that this animal, originating from under equator, moving up here, getting paler, we can put this animal indoors 90% of the time, and we're not even looking for what we are losing.
We would probably call it animal abuse if we did this same thing to some kind of...
there are rules in at least I heard on the podcast a few days ago, there are rules on what kind of light you can have when it comes to animals. And they are better than the rules that we have inside our offices. In Norway, you can have, in the middle of an office, you can have 2% of daylight.
In terms of lux?
In terms of lux.
Okay.
And it's not daylight like sunlight. It's from an overcast day. And you have 2% inside. There are so many measured things I can measure light now. I think I even have a Danish product here on my.
What is this?
It's a button. It's a lys button.
Nej.
It's a Danish product. Yeah.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
We need to get one.
And which will measure if you get enough light.
Really?
If you get enough light in the day, and if you have too much light in the evening and night. So
I'm getting one of those. What are they called?
Lys. A lys button.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, we'll figure that out. Okay.
And so we are getting too little light to, and this is important, too little light to trigger this system inside our brain. So for our brain, the light inside the office is well enough that I can see everything that I need to do, but it doesn't trigger the system in our brains that shows rhythm. Whether it's day or night.
And that's one of the problems.
That's a huge problem. Okay, if we stepped out into sunlight outside, it could be 100,000 lux, which is a measurement of how much light there is. If it was an overcast day, it would be 20,000 lux. If we go inside in a normal office, it could be 400 lux. If you go into your living room or in your kitchen, it could be like 200, 150 lux. So I have this button, but I also have other kinds of light meters that can show the degree of infrared and UV light and all of this. So it's measurable. And we need more sunlight, which is why it's important to get sunlight, particularly in the morning, to kickstart this system.
So let's talk about all the benefits of it then, because I think we've covered also, and other people have covered like the what's bad about the sun. I think there's written so many articles about that, and so many podcasts have been talking about that. Let's focus on what are the benefits of the sun, and let's do it like through a day, because the rays or the wavelengths change throughout the day, and it also changes what it's good for. And people, if a critical would say, but then just stay out the UV entirely, because you can get all the red and infrared in the morning, and that can kickstart your circadian rhythm. You can get the red in the evening. That would be fine, but that's not fine, because that's not good enough.
Probably it's in the last episode we talked about that. Okay, just a little bit is probably enough to get you out of the worst case scenario, and it's probably like that in the sunlight as well. That you don't really need to develop a tan. You probably don't need to be so much in the sunlight to get a lot of UV. What you need to do is to get above the just staying inside and avoiding the sun totally.
Yeah. Okay. And if we take it from the morning, like if we do it, wouldn't that be the easiest way to go through? Then you can see what it does for different diseases.
Yeah. So in the morning, you would go outside, or get sunlight, go into your balcony or whatever early on to kickstart the day with sunlight.
And that would be blue light.
That would be blue light.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because these melanopsin cells in our eye is kind of coded to the 480 nanometers blue wavelength. Because that has been the light until now.
Forever.
Until now we have other kind of lights. We must talk about LED lights and so on afterwards. But so you get that blue light in the morning, and then of course the light to us is white, but the most strongest part of it is the blue light that affects this system.
That spikes the cortisol, that gives us, that kind of turns on the circadian rhythm for that
turns
day.
on the circadian rhythm.
Okay.
And in the morning, the UV light, even in the summer, the UV part would be low. The UVB part will be low. And you can check that by checking the UV index to see how high that is. Okay. So in the summer now, probably if it's a really nice day here in Copenhagen, it would be a UV index of 6 or 7. And if you haven't worked up a tolerance and getting a tan just like you have now, that could be too much for you. So maybe if you don't have a tan yet, you would need to just be outside until the UV index is 1, 2, or 3. And to limit your time outside in the UV according to your built-up tolerance. Okay, but the UV light is also important to get then. And then afterwards, when it comes to the evening, the UV intensity would be lower again, and you can stay more outside. The temperature can be exactly the same. How you experience being outside in the sun in the morning and evening can be exactly the same as in the midday. But the UV part of it, the UVB part of it, will be much stronger in the middle of the day.
Which is also why I was just in Mallorca the last week, and then I've also followed the UV, of course, religiously. And it's interesting because in the evening, that's around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, it'll still be as warm, and the sun will feel as warm.
Yep.
But UV will be close to zero.
Yeah.
Because what actually gives the heat is the infrared.
Yeah.
And people kind of mistake that, the sun is hard. And I see people at 6 o'clock in the evening, no joke, like, oiling them in factor 50. I'm like, what do you, I mean, this, first of all, it doesn't make any sense, but now it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, so you need to know the UV index and what it is. Of course, I explain it in the book. So you can go to Mallorca, just make sure that you are paying attention to the UV index. It's still the same nice temperature. You can still bathe. You can still lie on your mattress in the sand and so on. Just make sure that you do it when the sun is not so intense. And then in the evening, you should start to dim the lights in the evening. If it's summer like now, maybe you would need some blue blocking glasses to make the same effect.
You would do that?
I do that.
Okay.
I did that yesterday. Saw the match in the soccer.
Maybe I should just
World
start
Cup.
wearing those glasses. I just think they look so ridiculous.
In the evening, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't use it when other people see me.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have some here, right, somewhere? Or where they gone? Well, we'll get some.
And then in the nighttime, from 10 o'clock or so, it should be really, really dark. And particularly in the room, so that you would have a circadian rhythm that is what our body is working at the best.
And do you have like a time span? Because, is it from 10 to 10 or 8? Because the day will be very long, like in the summertime, especially in Norway. You have super long days. The sun gets up at like 4 in the morning. Like, what is, do you like fake a more regular day? Like, do you mimic a more equatorial day?
I try to mimic. Yeah.
You try to
with the glasses and with the really dark bedroom.
Interesting.
So our bedroom, after I got the knowledge that I have now, is dark. It has dark. Everything is dark. The wallpaper we have painted. The window.
Really?
Dark. So there's almost no light coming in.
That's really interesting. Okay, I think the glasses also work for me, but I mean, I would like to have a
sleep mask also, but also we have also melanopsin receptors in the skin.
Yeah,
and it must do something, because if it didn't do anything, we wouldn't have it.
No, because it doesn't make any sense.
And we can also talk about sunglasses. So when you use sunglasses, particularly in the morning, you disturb that signal to the eye. So the eye is both something that makes the world visible to us, but it's also a light meter. The body uses the information of the intensity and wavelengths of the sunlight to adjust and regulate the processes inside the body.
Sure.
If the body gets the signal that it is not that much UV, it's dark, there's no UV penetrating the sunglasses, and the level can be 70% reduced by the sunglasses of the amount of light getting into your eye. Okay, the body will use that information. It does not know that you have sunglasses in front of your eyes, of course. It just deduces that, okay, there's not so much light out there now, and I don't need to put the defense system for the UVB up.
It's probably one of the most important parts, because you also write. So what you're saying is, if I put on sunglasses and I go out into high UV, then my body doesn't know that there's a lot of UV out there. So my defense is not up against it, producing the melanin or producing all that would be a defense, making it more likely for me to get a burn if I wear sunglasses.
Yeah. And that is a good thing about the skin. It's visible. You can see it. You can feel it. You know if you're getting sunburned or not. So you will see the result. Okay, if it was a matter of anything, how your kidneys work or your liver or some system, you wouldn't know. But you can see your skin. And I cannot count all the redheads and the light-skinned people who have told me that after they skipped the sunglasses, particularly in the morning, they can tolerate the sun.
But I am one of those people. You may not know this about me, but I have red pubic hair.
But I can see on your arms. Yeah, I don't want to know that.
No, I know. We call it Ed Sheeran at home. But I've never in my life had anything resembling a tan, at all. And I haven't worn sunscreen now. I've always worn sunscreen the first 38 years of my life, religiously. But after I changed my whole lifestyle as well as my diet, and I want to make sure we have time to also talk about that, I don't wear sunscreen at all. I don't burn. I mean, obviously, I burn if I stay in the sun, and I do. I sometimes test it and I take it too far, but that's my job. I want to see how far I can go. I do 2 hours of full UV 8-9. Obviously, I get a burn still, but I would have died 5 years ago doing that. And now I can sustain this color. Yeah. I mean, not that this is not just something that looks in a certain way. It also has it's a barrier that I'm using, right?
The melanin that you develop is a 500 million years old molecule, specially made to protect the DNA against the UV light.
So even the cells, bacteria, everything had it 500 million years ago.
Yeah, almost all animals have this. And so it's a natural sunscreen. It's built in, free. And it's also an immune regulator and an antioxidant. So it's an important molecule, which has been tested by evolution, for 500 million years. And if something doesn't work, okay, you're out.
So sunglasses and getting burned also has some kind of connection. So you would recommend no sunglasses ever?
I particularly not in the morning.
Det er sommer, det er varmt, og mange skal snart på ferie. Når det er så varmt, sveder vi mere og taber flere mineraler, end vi plejer. Så lige nu har de fleste af os brug for ekstra væske og elektrolytter. En af de bedste vaner, du kan give dig selv, det er at starte dagen med et glas elektrolytter. Salty, det er mit eget produkt. Jeg har lavet det sammen med Alexander Omel, der er speciallæge og longevity-ekspert, fordi vi simpelthen ikke kunne finde noget på markedet, der var godt nok. Det er et premium-produkt, og vi bruger magnesium bisglycinat af højeste kvalitet, den form kroppen rent faktisk kan optage. Og der er så meget i, at Salty dækker størstedelen af dit daglige magnesiumbehov. Vi ligger helt i toppen af, hvad der er tilladt i kosttilskud, så du behøver ikke at tage noget magnesiumtilskud ved siden af. Det er lavet helt uden sukker, og så bryder den ikke fasten. Det er lavet i Danmark og pakket i glas, ikke i plastik. Salty findes i fersken og citron. Jeg holder selv mest af fersken. Som lytter får du et helt særligt tilbud. Hvis du går ind og køber Salty på salty.health/Emil, så får du en gratis Travel Salty med til en værdi af 180 kroner. Det var altså på salty.health/Emil.
And I think only when you really need it,
Yeah.
when the sun is so strong that you feel like you need it. And
Sure.
I don't think, of course, I understand that if I'm at the cafe or bar, sitting with people and you're just squinting and a lot of your attention is towards the sun and not on the conversation and so on.
Then you're
or
fine.
if you're reading a book out in the sun, that's what I do. If I read a book out in the sun, often even with a cap or a hat, the sun can be too intense,
Sure.
and I will put on the sunglasses so I can read more easily. And I don't think that matters much, but I see around me that people go out even on a cloudy day, even in the morning, just putting routinely on autopilot on the sunglasses.
Yeah, when we go outside, the
and if
sunglasses
you don't know that it has a side effect, you could do that, but it has. And even the ophthalmologist, they don't know that. I've talked to several of them, and they're not aware of how, or some probably are, but most of them does not seem to be aware of the system that it will affect the processes inside the body.
Okay, so that's sunglasses. But what if we talk about the different diseases that you benefit from having sunlight or getting sunlight? Or I'm not saying curing them, but like where we can see in the science that maybe their onset is later.
Yeah, then we should start by discussing the melanoma in southern Sweden study. It's a 35-year-old study now on 30,000 southern Swedish women followed for now 34 years. It shows that it is divided into four levels. So they have asked these women, do you go to in the winter to a sunny place to get sunlight, or do you go to the mountains? Do you travel to the southern Europe or get sunlight in the summer? Do you get sun in Sweden in the summer? And do you take sunbeds or
So these are like four. You can get from 0 to 4 points. Yeah.
And the study shows that for each one you add, the longer you live, the less heart disease, the less all-cause cancer, and the less autoimmune diseases you get, or the other.
All
the rest
four
of
of
it.
them.
Yeah, it will reduce the chances of dying from heart disease by 60%. It's a lot. It will reduce the deaths from all-cause cancer, or kind of, like a bag of different diagnoses. It doesn't say that it cures all kinds of cancers, but in general, a death from cancer, it will reduce by just below 40%.
What if there was a drug who could offer that?
Yeah,
that would be sold out immediately.
Oh, yeah. It would be really expensive. And then, but even more interesting is the deaths that has nothing to do with those diseases. That is 65% reduction, even more.
So all-cause mortality. Like anything, this is technically a term saying if you wake up tomorrow, do we die or do we not die? Like
it will. The ones who get the most sun or the ones who get the least sun have about double the chance of dying in a certain period than the ones who get the most sun. So, and it's comparable to smoking. So the studies show that not getting sunlight or not seeking sunlight, because it's not about avoiding sunlight, it's about not seeking it, right? So the death from the ones who are not seeking sunlight is at the same order of magnitude as the ones who smoke.
that is insane.
And that is kind of the benchmark for the worst thing we can do, right? And this is how
let me just process, Torkil. So what you're saying is, if you don't actively seek the sun, we're not talking about people who are completely avoiding it, like staying indoor. We're talking people who don't actively seek the sun. You can compare those to people smoking in terms of chance of dying. That would be, so you could either start seeking the sun or stop smoking. That would give the same benefits in rough numbers.
Yeah. And this study is because so many studies on sunlight and sunscreen and so on, they come from Australia, where the sunlight and the intensity of the sunlight is just a totally different story. So
also, it's white people who moved to the most sunny place on the planet.
Yeah.
And so you can't use that in Norway.
So this study is the closest we get, to, okay, this is what we should do here.
In Sweden, Denmark, Norway.
And it's this exact same study that shows that the ones who use the sunbeds in the winter, they live 10 months longer than the others. So there's a lot of things that these studies point to that we should think differently, in my opinion.
Okay, so... we have to talk about two more things before your hand is pointing at me because we already talked a long time. We have to three more things. Fuck it. We need to talk about sunscreen. We need to talk about this whole. I want to talk about this whole U-formed shape of a curve that when we're close to equator, there's almost none of these diseases, and the further away we get, the more. I just want to talk about that briefly, and I want to talk about nutrition and sun exposure. I don't know how much you know about that, but these are the things that. What do you want to start with? That's the last thing we can.
We can start with the U-shaped curves.
Yeah, let's do that
because what we can see, what is the trouble with research on sunlight is that it has been regarded as such a cancer-driving factor that it's not ethically to have randomized controlled studies.
Makes sense.
And have some people out in the sun and some people not in the sun. So you have to find kind of a sideways into the knowledge about how the sun works. And one of the sideways is the latitude. So whether you live close to the equator or whether you live where we live, where if it wasn't for the Gulf Stream, nobody should live here, right? And these diseases like multiple sclerosis,
which is autoimmune, right?
Autoimmune disease, diabetes type 1,
also autoimmune,
and this rheumatoid arthritis from children, also autoimmune, and all of these have a kind of a curve that goes from the top in the south, Australia and so on, southern Australia, southern Chile and Argentina.
Where there's little UV light.
Yeah, little UV light. And then there's less of these diseases when you approach the equator. And it goes up again quite steep until you get to the Northern Europe and North America and so on.
The MS was, it's almost beautifully on this UV curve. It's like, not UV, a U curve, right? It must make some kind of, what kind of conclusion can you draw? What question should you write?
That this has something to do with sunlight. And they also, of course, have studies showing that, okay, if you move from a southern country to the north or the other way around, that it will affect the risk of these diseases also.
So if you move from, let's say, equator to Norway, then your risk of that
increases.
Your move.
So it will affect it.
So it can't be something about your genetics. It's not like, if you live on the equator, you're African or you're something different. That argument is void because if you move them here, it has the same risk as everyone else.
Yeah, or it will be driven towards that risk.
I understand. Okay, that's one thing.
Yeah, and other kinds you can measure the vitamin D level as a measurement, mostly on how much sun have you gotten. And that is one way, and you can also see if you live higher up in the mountains at a higher, above sea level, the more UV and stronger sunlight, and the less of the same diseases you'll
I think
get.
that's really interesting. I didn't know this, that every 1 kilometer you get 10-12% more UV light. So let's say Mexico City, for instance, which is 2 kilometers-ish above. So they automatically get 20-25% more UV comparable to that latitude.
Yeah.
And that's why people in Austria, where they're very strict with following health protocols, everything, they can almost measure, you write in the book, you can almost measure for each 10 meter that they climb up, they get less and less cancer.
And that is
in rough numbers,
absolutely.
right?
And that is where they have the heliotherapy clinics, early in the 20s and 30s and so on, before the antibiotics.
And helio meaning sun therapy, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the use here. I want to talk about sunscreen.
Sunscreen.
Let's because we love sunscreen here. It's like really we love that shit.
And what's important to know about that is that the research does not show any benefit when it comes to skin cancer.
Why do we use it then?
And that is, I was shocked when I found out. I couldn't believe it. The impression that I had that sunscreen really helped protect me against skin cancer was a given. It was kind of obvious. That's the message that we have gotten.
I even still think that because I'm just careful, but I don't use sunscreen. But I thought it protected me against that.
Yeah, but when you get into the research, there is no research showing that exists, or that is there is one study showing it. Only one. I mean, nothing else you would give people advice on just one study. I mean,
especially
you'd be laughed at. You'd be laughed at.
If there are hundreds of studies and the others say otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this one study from the Sunshine Coast of Australia, 1,600 people. The one that was responsible for the study has been sponsored by L'Oreal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they were only using sunscreen on the arms and the face and neck, because it wasn't originally made for melanoma. That was only some result they found out later. And this is not how you do studies. The thing that they found no difference in basal cell carcinoma, which is the most common one.
Which is the one
which is not dangerous.
And which is not either, they're not even cancer, it's not called a cancer, it's called cancer, but it's not in the cancer registry in Denmark at least.
It's so common. And of course, you don't really want to get it, because when you have to cut it out, it can make, big...
It's an aesthetic...
it's an aesthetic problem more than a health problem in that sense. What it did affect was the squamous cell carcinoma, but it didn't affect whether you got it or not. It will affect, if you get it, how many will you get? And it reduced the amount of how many you would get.
Okay.
And it's also important that this wasn't a kind of a normal average people. They had selected the ones who already had solar damage to their skin, and 25% of them already had a skin cancer. So it wasn't kind of putting a random crowd.
Okay, so what you're saying is that as a doctor, looking at all the different research, not being biased, hopefully, you would say you cannot find any thing in the literature pointing towards that sunscreen, sun lotion, all this stuff should protect you against skin cancer.
Yeah. Also, the ones who have shown differences is more in the direction of they get more melanoma from using sunscreen. But then they can argue, okay, is it because the ones who use sunscreen are more in the sun and that is a problem? Well, we don't know. But anyway, there's more use of sunscreen now than ever. 98% of Norwegians use sunscreen on their kids. Somewhere around 90% use it on themselves. Still, it's kind of a steep curve going up on diagnosed melanomas, even with this kind of explosion in use of sunscreen.
What is it? What is it then? What do we use? I mean, what is sunscreen for then? I mean, what's the drawbacks of it then?
We don't really know. The ingredients of chemical sunscreens are not on the FDA's list of safe and effective. because we don't really know. You can trace the elements from the chemical sunscreens in the urine, in the breast milk, in the blood of children and adults, more than the dose that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, regards as safe. So we don't really know. And when you put like 30 or 40 of them in the same, bottle, and put it on the body, and at all times throughout your lifetime, we don't know. Most of the research, because this is a cosmetic product and not a medical product, is short time studies. And we don't really know how it will affect us.
But what do you see sunscreen? I mean, is there any?
What I use it for?
Yeah,
I use it to not get sunburned.
Okay.
So if I am out sailing or I'm out on a special day, we're barbecuing, and I know that I can look in the mirror and I see that, okay, if I go out and this barbecue for 5 hours, I will sunburn. Get a sunburn. It's painful. I don't want it. Who wants that? You know? Then I would use it. And I would preferably use a mineral sunscreen.
Sure.
For that.
Which reflects it back instead of getting
and
it.
now many of the non-nano mineral sunscreen will not make you pale, because earlier you would look like a clown,
Sink.
with a sink and with a white skin.
So that does exist.
Yeah.
So you would still use
exist,
that.
yeah.
I mean, I also use that. I was in Fiji sailing around,
Yeah.
and me going to Fiji sailing, where you both have the reflection of the water, everything. I had to use some kind of sunscreen.
Yeah, and I don't usually like using a sunscreen. So what I do now, in 2 weeks, or actually in 1 week, I'll be sailing in Belize in the Caribbean, and with probably a UV of 12 or so. Then I do some solarium.
You do solarium?
I do, yeah. Because the level that I have here, which I've been in Spain, I've been in Greece with a UV level of 8, is not enough for me to go out on the sailboat without getting sunburned next week in the Caribbean. So what I do then is to go into the solarium, and of course also the added benefit of maybe living 10 months longer at some end. It was probably good, but
I am not recommending people going to the sunbed. I'm just saying this now. I didn't say it.
I'm
not getting one at home.
Yeah, I don't recommend.
No.
I don't give advice at all.
No.
Okay.
We're just talking.
You do what you want to do. Sure. Right. I'm just telling you that the latest research from the best study, which is what we should look to when it comes to melanoma and sun behavior, shows that you will get 10 more months of life if you use solarium in the winter. You do with that what you want. I don't care what you do. I know what I will do, but I'm not going to say that you should do it,
Okay, last thing. Oh my God. I wish we could talk for 5 hours because I just want to go through a whole book with you. But anyway, last thing. Diet and sun.
Yeah. I can.
Specifically
funny.
omega-6,
It's funny.
omega-3, that whole conversation. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what you know?
It's a bit funny because just a few days ago I had a lecture on my previous book called The Camera Cure, before these books, which is about therapeutic photography. And I saw a picture of myself before my change of lifestyle from 2013. And I'm in the Caribbean. I had been there for 5 months, so I should be used to the sunlight. Right? I didn't use probably sunscreen, but I'm really sunburned. Really sunburned.
You're like red, like glowing,
red,
and that's
glowing. Rudolph knows.
Yeah, I know exactly.
And I know that I would not be like that today. I couldn't get sunburned like that. Just like you say that there's a difference, and that I think has both to do with I don't drink alcohol anymore. When we sailed from the Canary Islands, we filled the bilges of the boat with wine. Because it was so cheap.
Old smoking alcoholic just
I had lots of snus with me. And stuffed the boat. This is a catamaran. It's quite big. It's a 44.
Full of wine.
Full of wine.
But also so expensive in Norway. So if anything, you could just sell it.
I had wine for a year and a half.
my
And
God.
at the end of the trip, I ran out of snus, so I had to smoke again.
Yes, smart man.
Smart man.
That is the doctor you want advice from. This is, I mean, but I think the funny thing is, if you can say these things, if you can change this, then everyone can. Because you're a middle-aged white male with a education. You were such a know-it. You would have known everything back then, or
I should have
sorted
known.
yourself.
Yeah. But it's a big help, And unfortunately, of course, my father dying, like we talked about in the last episode, that's to get that fear, that scares you to do better choices.
Yeah.
If he hadn't died, I would not have changed anything. I don't know who I would have been now, 13 years later. I can see from the pictures 13 years ago that it would probably not be a nice sight. I probably would have contracted some kind of disease,
A chronic or type 2
because
diabetes.
I would not have changed.
Okay.
So everybody can change, but I think you need the motivation, and that kind of a negative motivation can be even stronger. They have made measurements of mice on the difference between smelling a cat and cheese. And smelling a cat is much more effective than smelling cheese. Okay?
So this is you smelling a cat.
This is me smelling a cat.
Okay.
And changing things.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Is there anything you want to add in terms of the sun? The book is coming out in
the book
late
is coming out
June,
in Norway
right?
in late July. Hopefully, Turbine, the publisher, my Danish publisher Turbine, will hopefully buy the book, and hopefully it could be out in Denmark.
I think it will work in Denmark. I'm looking around, but I'm pretty sure that would fly. I'm happy to help you promote it anyway.
And I'm very well aware that we are heading straight into a storm on this, right? which because we are saying things that contradicts everything that people have heard for 50 years. You would think it's true.
Yeah. But
there's a lot of prestige that will be lost. There's a lot of money that will be lost. And it's going to be, and I can recommend, my book will probably only be in Danish in maybe hopefully, half a year or a year or so. But there's a book coming out tomorrow on this day. So by this is sent, it's called In Defense of Sunlight by Rowan Jacobson, who is an American science journalist. And he has based it on the same sources that I have. So he's basically...
What's it called again?
In Defense of Sunlight.
In Defense of Sunlight. Let's get that. We'll get that. I'll read that.
And the reason why I have been hurrying to get my book out, to get it at the same time of his, because I know we have the same sources.
Okay.
So his preface is by the dermatologist Richard Weller, who has the UK Biobank study. I have Pelle Lindqvist from the MIST study. And these are actually the first... And it maybe sounds ubeskjedent, maybe, but these are the two first real comprehensive books on the subject that is updated with all the latest research. So I think this will change things, but I'm prepared to. It'll be a fight.
It will, but
I'm sure.
There's a lot of people who will not go down.
I mean, now I'm fighting the Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish cancer organization. So we're.
I think just the conclusion should be obviously to the people should draw their own conclusions, and that's perfectly fine. If they want to put the sunscreen on their children, also, I think it's perfectly fine. I think you should have to do whatever feels right. But if someone can deal with reading a Norwegian book, and I would say it's quite easy as a Dane to read. I think
the written language is quite similar.
It's very similar. And you're very good at, and whenever there's an area or a part where you actually put a little owl next to it, if it's the nerdy stuff, so you can just skip this if you're not a health practitioner or you're not a professional. I mean, obviously, I read the whole thing. I will tell you, but you could skip that if you just want to get like the.
The trouble with the book is that I had to, as there is no book to point to.
No.
With the research, I had to make both the book for the medical doctors and the professionals, and at the same time that it should be understandable and
For everyone.
and actionable for everyone. So it was a
Well,
double
let's see what
edge.
happens, Torkil. I just looked through. You've been on several Norwegian podcasts as well, and I think the Norwegians and the Danes are quite similar in their view on the sun. And I look at the comments as well. I'm sure you also do, and you're actually good to comment back. I think you have a lot of. I mean, you have. Oh my God, you have a good temper. I think. I don't think you don't annoy easily, but because you're answering people like so diplomatically, and I could never do that. But I'm impressed that you can.
I can
deal with But I'm happy you sit here and say these things because I think it's super, super important. I've been saying this for a long time now, but I finally, with your book and also there's some kind of leverage to what we're coming with. So thank you for that. Maybe we'll do an update in a couple of months.
We can people can ask questions.
Yes.
Yep.
Let's do maybe I'll go to Oslo. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be
You live in maybe you're traveling all the time.
in the
but-
middle of Oslo.
Yes, we'll figure that out. We'll prepare questions once your book is out. We'll take a couple of months, and then we'll see how it's received and everything, and then we can do another episode. I'm sure people have tons and tons of questions because we barely scratched the surface with this episode. Honestly,
yeah.
there's so much to say about this subject. There's so many things that the sun interacts with in the body. We haven't even talked about
One thing we must say. One thing we must say is that dark-skinned people in Norway and Denmark, they need even more sunlight. They can need 5 to 6 times the amount of time in the sun to get the same amount of benefits. And we haven't taken that into consideration. And also, they have minimal chances of getting melanoma. So it's really not. And Australia has switched around on their advice for their population, which are dark-skinned, that they don't no longer need to use sunscreen.
Really?
Yeah.
My God. Okay. Torkil, we have to end this before I don't know what to tell you. Thank you so much for coming and flying down here for doing this episode with me. I'm so happy with it. And everyone who's listening, go get the book if you can't get enough of this, at least to take your own, get your own conclusions.
Or the American one.
Or the American one. Thank you so much, Torkil.
Thank you.
Fuck me.